The Philippines became Southeast Asia's fastest growing economy last year, overtaking Vietnam and Malaysia.
It started as a quiet question, the kind that slowly spreads from whispered conversations to full public curiosity. One day, a familiar name was everywhere in the news cycle. Then, almost without warning, that name seemed to fade. People began asking the same thing again and again, both online and offline. What really happened to Usec Cabral? This is not a story built on shock or exaggeration. It is a story about power, responsibility, public service, and the complicated space where politics meets public trust. It is about how attention can rise quickly, how silence can feel louder than headlines, and how unanswered questions often leave the deepest impressions. To understand what happened, we first need to understand why Usec Cabral mattered in the first place. For a time, Usec Cabral was a visible figure within government circles. Known for holding a key position as an undersecretary, Cabral's role placed them close to important decisions that affected daily life. Their name appeared in official announcements, policy discussions, and public briefings. For many Filipinos who follow governance closely, Usec Cabral represented competence, stability, and continuity within the system. Being an undersecretary is not a ceremonial role. It involves oversight, coordination, and execution of policies that often carry real consequences. It also means being part of a structure where accountability is always expected, even when recognition is not. In this environment, visibility usually comes from responsibility rather than personal promotion. That is why the shift felt noticeable. At some point, observers began to notice a change. Media appearances became less frequent. Public updates no longer carried the same name. Official communications continued, but without the familiar presence people had grown used to seeing. For those who pay attention to these details, the absence raised a natural question. Was this a routine change, or was something more happening behind the scenes? In public service, transitions are not unusual. Roles shift. Assignments change. Officials move quietly from one responsibility to another. But when change happens without explanation, it creates space for speculation. And speculation, when left unchecked, often grows louder than facts. Some reports suggested that Usec Cabral had stepped back from public-facing duties. Others hinted at internal restructuring within the department. A few voices online began connecting the silence to larger political shifts, while more cautious observers urged patience and restraint. What became clear was that no single narrative fully explained the situation. This is where the story becomes less about one person and more about the system itself. Government institutions often operate on timelines that do not align with public curiosity. Decisions are made internally, announcements are delayed, and clarity sometimes arrives long after attention has moved elsewhere. In this space, the public is left to interpret what little information is available. According to available information, there was no official statement confirming wrongdoing or misconduct by Usec Cabral. No formal accusation was presented in a public forum. No confirmed disciplinary action was announced. This absence of clear facts is important because silence does not automatically mean guilt, failure, or controversy. At the same time, silence rarely feels neutral. For supporters and colleagues, the lack of explanation created concern. For critics, it invited skepticism. For ordinary citizens, it became another reminder of how distant government processes can feel from everyday understanding. People were not necessarily demanding scandal. Many were simply seeking clarity. As time passed, public attention shifted to other headlines. New stories emerged. New figures entered the spotlight. Yet the question lingered in quieter spaces, especially among those who remembered Usec Cabral's earlier visibility. What changed, and why was the change handled so quietly? To explore that question honestly, it helps to look at the broader context of public service culture in the Philippines. In many cases, officials step aside temporarily due to administrative reviews, internal audits, or policy disagreements. These processes are often confidential, not because of secrecy, but because they are designed to protect fairness and due process. Announcing incomplete findings can do more harm than good, especially when reputations are involved.
Some public speculation suggested that Usec Cabral may have been reassigned or placed in a less visible role. Others believed the shift was voluntary, possibly to focus on work that did not require public engagement. Without confirmation, these remain possibilities rather than conclusions. What is certain is that the absence of clear communication allowed uncertainty to take root. Midway through this unfolding story, something else happened that reignited interest. Online discussions resurfaced, old interviews were reshared. People began revisiting earlier moments in Usec Cabral's career, searching for clues they might have missed. This became a secondary hook, pulling attention back to a question many thought had already faded. Why did this matter so much to people?
Because stories like this touch on trust. Trust in institutions. Trust in transparency. Trust that when something changes at the top, the public will eventually understand why. When that understanding does not arrive, even neutral events can feel unsettling. It is important to emphasize that public service is rarely as simple as it appears from the outside. Officials operate within layers of authority, political pressure, and administrative rules. A change in leadership above them can alter priorities overnight. Budget shifts can redefine entire departments. What looks like disappearance may actually be adaptation. Some analysts noted that during periods of political transition, many officials reduce their public presence intentionally. This can be a strategic choice rather than a forced one. Remaining quiet can sometimes protect ongoing projects from unnecessary attention or controversy. Others pointed out that not all contributions are meant to be visible. Some of the most impactful work happens far from cameras and headlines. In this interpretation, Usec Cabral's reduced visibility was not an ending, but a repositioning. Still, the lack of official clarification meant that none of these interpretations could be confirmed. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth about modern information culture. When facts are scarce, narratives multiply. Responsible discussion requires resisting the urge to fill gaps with assumptions. It requires patience, restraint, and respect for the people involved. In the case of Usec Cabral, maintaining a neutral, analytical view is essential. According to publicly accessible records, there has been no definitive announcement explaining the change in visibility. There has been no verified report of legal action or formal removal tied to misconduct. Any claim beyond that enters the realm of speculation. That does not mean questions are invalid. It means answers must be grounded in verified information. For many viewers, this story feels personal, not because they know Usec Cabral, but because they recognize the pattern. A public figure rises, contributes, then fades from view without explanation. It happens in politics, business, and even entertainment. The difference is that in public service, the stakes feel higher. People want to believe that systems are fair, transparent, and accountable. When clarity is missing, even temporarily, confidence can weaken. As time continues to pass, the story of Usec Cabral becomes less about a single event and more about a moment that highlights how communication gaps can shape public perception, a moment that reminds us how quickly curiosity can turn into concern. It also raises a deeper question. Should institutions do more to explain transitions, even when no controversy exists? Or does constant explanation risk oversharing and misinterpretation? There is no easy answer. What we can say is this: silence creates space. That space will always be filled, either by facts or by speculation. The choice of which one prevails depends on how information is shared. As viewers, we also carry responsibility. Consuming stories critically, questioning sources, and avoiding the spread of unverified claims helps maintain a healthier public conversation. Not every unanswered question hides a dramatic truth. Sometimes it simply reflects the slow, complex nature of governance. As we reach the end of this discussion, one thing remains clear.
The question of what happened to Usec Cabral is not fully answered, at least not publicly. What remains is a reminder of how stories evolve when information is limited, and how important it is to approach such stories with balance and respect. Perhaps clarity will come with time. Perhaps the story will remain a quiet footnote in a larger political narrative. Either way, it invites reflection on how we engage with power, silence, and the people who serve within systems far larger than themselves. If this story made you think, if it raised questions about transparency, leadership, or public trust, then it has already served a purpose. If you found this breakdown helpful, take a moment to like the video. It helps more people discover thoughtful discussions like this one. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into stories shaping the Pinoy pulse. And most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think matters most when public figures step out of the spotlight? Your voice is part of the conversation.